Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Futureproof. On this podcast, I speak with market-leading executives that are really focused around future-proofing their businesses and focusing on really industrial change within their companies. And I'm extremely excited to have this guest on the show today. So I would like to introduce Sandy Stojkovski, the current CEO of North America for Vitesco Technologies, my guest today. I'll hand over to you, Sandy.
Hi, Taylor. Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be a guest on your podcast.
No, pleasure having you. So, Sandy, so first of all, as I always get my guests to give a little introduction to themselves, just kind of where you are at the moment, where you've been in the past, just giving a quick overview before we get into the details, should we say?
Sure. So, I think it's best to maybe start a little bit at the beginning. I was born and raised in Southeast Michigan, really inspired by my dad to go into engineering since I love to solve problems. And I think of the engineers are the world's problem solvers. I graduated from the University of Michigan with my Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering and later added an MBA and a master's in Industrial Manufacturing Systems Engineering. About the first 15 years of my career, so I worked in the auto industry in a variety of functional roles, from product engineering and manufacturing to business development, both on the customer OEM side and the supplier side for tier ones and consultancies. And then through that more, I'll say, well-rounded lens, I spent about the last 11 years of my career, so now in business leadership roles. I really found my true calling is running P&Ls for suppliers. That's where I think our most business leadership challenges are, and also the opportunity to be quite entrepreneurial. So within those last 11 years or so, I've stayed on that supplier side, first starting up my own company and later having it acquired by AVL and running it for them for some years, then joining TRW, heading up a new engineering excellence organization for them until ultimately ZF acquired TRW, got to take part in helping these two mega companies come together into one. And then went to work at Magnati Marelli as the president for NAFTA for their powertrain business, turning that business around, and then later joining Continental, which now we call it Vitesco Technologies, which is formerly known as the powertrain division. And that's where you now find me.
No, perfect. That's a great insight. And I know you mentioned earlier kind of the engineering side attracted you, but what was the main parts that attracted you to the automotive industry, and how did you go about getting into the industry?
Yeah, well, being born and raised in Southeast Michigan, there are really two things that are kind of in the water here, automotive and the University of Michigan. My dad was a big influence on my career, and given my interests, especially in math, engineering was a really good home for me. Saying he inspired me into engineering isn't quite the full story. My sister and I, who both became engineers, actually still joke that around the dinner table at night, it was kind of more what kind of engineer did we want to be rather than, which profession did we want to go into. So engineering was definitely a kind of path. Automotive being right here was a really great opportunity. And I was very fortunate to get into automotive through Ford Motor Company as a summer intern. And so during my bachelor's in mechanical engineering, I went through 4 different roles each summer in different parts of product development. And this was just a fantastic way to see the auto industry and to get excited by it.
Okay, no, I understand it. And so obviously from intern now to CEO of a region, there's a great jump and a great story. But you mentioned there some of the businesses you work for. Let's go into kind of some of your experiences in terms of kind of the turnaround situations. You mentioned that TRW then merging into ZF, so the American culture into the German culture. You've been in Magneti Marelli, the Italian culture. So how have you approached those kind of different aspects with the culture and the turnarounds?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right to point out that there's quite some different cultures, even starting back with AVL, that's an Austrian company, and then joining TRW, at first an American company, then acquired by a German company, then going into Magneti Marelli, an Italian company, and now within a German headquartered companies. The very important point to mention about all of these, though, is that these were all global businesses. And so while you could say they were headquartered in one part of the world or another, being global businesses means that to be successful in any of these companies, I had to truly bring, a global-minded citizen type of perspective. And, truly, because of those experiences now, I've really come to the point of view that to be a leader in this industry, you must be comfortable and capable leading global teams, and that means people from all over.
Okay, and for you then, what would you say the most important aspects to a turnaround are?
Well, a turnaround is kind of a specific kind of transformation. I love these transformational challenges. We're, of course, going through one in our industry now. A turnaround is a very unique kind of transformation that requires, I think, the very best of a leader. And, when going through a turnaround myself, I've really focused on a kind of recipe that really starts with the people. If you think about a turnaround, you recognize that you can't do any of it on your own. And when you step into an environment like that, you've got a team, you've got challenges, you've got customer issues, you've got manufacturing issues. There's usually all kinds of things around. So my playbook really starts with very much collaboratively setting a vision, facing the very hard realities of the current situation, and making sure that then we set a path that reflects both where we want to be, but where we are, and just really concrete what are the actions that get there, staying super positive all the way through, keeping a kind of dual focus on the short term and the long term. This is absolutely critical if you want to come out of a crisis better than you went into it. And really just getting everyone on board. You cannot make decisions that affect people without including them in those decisions. And so that kind of broad sketch outlines my approach to the turnarounds that I've led.
No, and I think it's great to hear that the people are the main part, getting them bought into the challenges, and as you said, not making key decisions without people feeling involved, which is a great aspect to do. Obviously, turnarounds are not just the only thing you've been involved in. As you mentioned, different transformation projects. So what's been most enjoyable for you from a transformation side?
It's always the most fun to grow, right? Aggressive growth is super fun. I think about what kind of businesses I've led. And, if you're familiar with the book, The First 90 Days, which I think a lot of people are, they talk about the different kinds of businesses with the STARS acronym. So S, startup, T, turnaround, A, aggressive growth, R is restructuring, and S is sustaining success. I think I've led an ST and an A and an R. I have not led necessarily the sustaining success one, maybe because you don't bring in a new leader probably to do sustaining success very often. So, of the ST, A, and R, obviously aggressive growth is super fun, creates lots of opportunity, has its own unique challenges as well. But that's certainly what I've found to be a very rewarding kind of business. Of course, you can find a lot of reward in the other transformations too.
Okay, and then coming on to kind of for you so far throughout your career, which has been very successful and is still going, should we say? So what would you say the kind of biggest challenges have been versus the biggest achievements?
Well, and almost every achievement, I would probably tell you it's also one of the biggest challenges. And that's probably what makes it one of, my favored achievements, is because it was so challenging. Looking back, especially over the last 11 years or so, founding my own advanced technology planning firm, having it get acquired and then running it successfully, this was a big success that I look back on and say it was also a kind of smart risk to quit my job and go do something like that. That was a key one. Another one, within TRW, while I was only there for about a year because of the acquisition, having the opportunity to co-lead the technology activities for one of the industry's largest supplier acquisitions to date was truly an exciting challenge, also a good achievement to be able to bring that now ZF's footprint together for technology. And then maybe more recently, leading the successful regional turnaround efforts for a global automotive supplier. These are some of my favorite ones that predated me joining Continental, now Vitesco Technologies. Coming into Continental, this was a pretty exciting challenge. Also, maybe another risk because Continental hired me and said, okay, let's go straight to Regensburg, Germany. So I moved my family, married and have 2 now teenage boys. And that was no small endeavor to set them up in new schools and do all of that. But that allowed me to go head up the global injectors business for Continental. And with that was definitely, an important topic because it was all about restructuring, turning around, and eventually divesting the business in support of our company's now strategy to go all in on electrification. So those are some of my favorites from the past. Happy to talk more as you might have questions.
Yeah, no, so let's peel it right back. As you mentioned, starting a company, then it being acquired by AVL and you running that. That must be a great personal achievement. As you said, starting something from nothing and then somebody noticing your work and coming in to take that over. So how was that for you?
Well, it was very rewarding, like you just said. It was also quite a learning experience for me. I kind of look back on the leader I was 11 years ago and shake my head because, I was so focused on the tasks and serving our customers and things. I really hadn't figured out my own leadership approach at that time. So let's say it was an important growing experience for me as much as it was a successful achievement for our team.
Okay. And then coming to something more recent, obviously, as you mentioned, moving to Germany, kind of setting up shop there now. How was that from a cultural standpoint, even for you and your family, leaving everything you've known, going into Germany and taking over that huge portion of the injectors business?
Yeah, I mean, taking over the injectors business as an outsider in a company like Continental, this is something where you could say it could have gone terribly bad, right? It could have been like an organ rejection, when you have a transplant. But I'm really grateful that my prior experiences working in so many different cultures and working globally, like I said before, really helped support me in my work endeavors there. As it related to the family, the experience of moving your family, up until then, I'd led my entire life living from Southeast Michigan. So that was really a new experience culturally and personally. And we all grew quite a lot. I think about the beginning, my husband spoke a little German, but other than that, the rest of us didn't speak any. And now, I've gotten myself to a level where I'd say I could pass a basic basic level. One of my sons is absolutely fluent in German, and the other one is on his way. So, I think we've moved quite a lot, as well as really getting to take advantage of traveling, that part of the world in a way you just can't when you're only visiting for a week or 2 at a time.
No, I understand it. And then obviously now coming from Continental now into the Vitesco business, as you mentioned, the powertrain business, very, very focused on sustainability, very focused around electrification. So kind of what are the challenges you're facing within the Vitesco business now?
Well, it's a really interesting time to be in this business. The powertrain space in particular is super exciting in the auto industry because we're going through this massive transformation from, the internal combustion engines all the way into fully electric vehicles. And this transformation on a technology basis leads to a need to transform on a business and on a people basis in huge ways. So I'm head of North America here for Vitesco Technologies, which really includes all the functions and business units across our powertrain portfolio. And that's, a very exciting challenge. On top of that, we have a legal spinoff to occur next month, actually. So September 2021, which, having the legal spinoff, you could say, okay, you're going to do that, but getting ready for it was a tremendous effort, and the team has done a fantastic job, doing all the things that we needed in order to be able to stand on our own 2 feet as a fully separated company, no longer relying on any services or otherwise from what used to be the mothership of Continental. So this is a pretty exciting chapter. It's involved, establishing a regional structure, systems, a work culture, policies, as well as hiring and onboarding hundreds of new team members during a pandemic, I'll say, so that we're ready to be legally separated from Continental in September.
And has that been even more exciting from you from a product standpoint because of your engineering background, everything being electrified? Has that made it that bit more interesting for you?
I think so. I think as an industry, we tend to focus on the products a lot. And this product transformation is super exciting. But Taylor, if I'm honest, I'll tell you the part that excites me the most is what this means for the business and the people. I don't think often we think so much about how the business models and the business needs to change, and how the people side of things really has to change. And that kind of white space, if you will, I find super exciting, and it's kind of bringing out the best of the entrepreneur in me. And so, of course, the technology part is exciting, but it's the whole complex ball of wax that makes it really interesting.
No, I understand that, and it boils back down to the importance of the people, as you've already said. And in terms of what is it that you're wanting to achieve now with the spin-off, where do you want to see Vitesco going, let's say, over the next 5 years, would you say, especially within North America?
Yeah, we have a very clear strategy as a company towards 2030 of where we want to be. Our whole vision is around electrified, emotion, everywhere. And these 3 E's, as we call them, then have translated into a very clear strategic direction on where we go. And it's all about powering clean mobility. And this kind of strong choice for electrification as it relates to clean mobility is really what brings us all together as a company. In North America, we play a very important role to support that. Our market share for electrification, new business acquisitions is extremely important. Our ability to be a great place to work, where we're an employer of choice, so that we get the right kind of talent, extremely important to it. And other parts of our strategy, we find here in North America very important pieces that we have to contribute going forward. And so that's what sets our North American direction.
Okay, and then I know, kind of touching back onto the importance of the people, and I know from your side there's been things implemented now, focusing on kind of returning to work, other activities. So do you want to touch on those activities?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Taylor. So, maybe to say we really see this as such a unique opportunity at Vitesco Technologies. Here we are spinning off. So you could say in one way, we're about to have our birth date, right? But we're also part of a 150-year-old company. So we're a 150-year-old startup. That's the exciting challenge. And that 150-year-old startup gets to decide, new for itself, how does it want to be? How does it want to conduct work? How does it, how fast and how flexible do we want to be? And so a big piece of being an employer choice, we think, is enabling, the very best of our employees to come to work. And that very much relates also to how we're returning to work. So as we return to work, which I'll say is much harder than just sending everybody home. Returning people to work is really much more complicated. And so we took our time and thoughtfully put together a kind of work from anywhere policy that is only 4 pages long. So it's very streamlined, but it gives the kind of detail that our managers and our team members need in order to make good decisions for themselves. And this return to work now allows people to, with their manager, decide on a category of work, whether it's in person fully or hybrid or work from anywhere or fully remote. These are our 4 categories, to select from there, and then to have an ongoing dialogue to make sure that that continues to work both for the company and for the individuals. So this work from anywhere, I just explained it in a very short period of time. It took a huge team to put this together, make sure it's legal, that we're tax efficient, that we've got the best of the employees' needs put together, and also fitting with our facilities and things. So really a big project. Strong congratulations to the team that piloted this new process. So that work from anywhere is a really big piece. I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention that here in the region, we're really driving diversity, equity, and inclusion on behalf of the entire company. It's pretty clear with the events last year with George Floyd and other things that have been going on that there is a huge case for change, and never wanting to waste a crisis, and also really wanting to make a big impact on our team here. We took the responsibility to set a strategy in place for North America around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And lo and behold, as we started to share this strategy with our board, our executive board said, "Hey, this is great. Can you do this for the rest of the world too?" And so, in fact, we just hired and onboarded in July this year our first ever Chief Diversity Officer. She is based in the US here and is globally responsible. And so as a member of our team here, I'm super excited that our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts now have the benefit of her experience as well.
No, that's great to hear. And I think, again, steps back onto the importance of the workforce, the importance of the people, which is driving the business, which is great. But you did touch on something there, which was the working from home aspect. Again, shows that you're able to give employees the autonomy of coming up with their work schedule. But again, I expect this has all come from the crazy thing that we call COVID. Which took a kind of huge impact on businesses and the way we work, even down to video callings rather than meetings, etc. So what's your views on the state of the market due to COVID?
Yeah, well, the state of the market due to COVID, I mean, if you look at it, we actually have been quite resilient and been able to, first of all, bounce back far quicker than anyone expected. That bounce back being far quicker, of course, led to supply chain disruptions that have been in the news for months and months now. So, I'm sure everyone's well familiar with those. And so as we all continue to deal with the effects of this faster than expected bounce back and the supply chain issues, we continue to work together with our customers, ensuring the maximum supply is made available, and really ensuring also that we've got the right teams there in place to do that. And this, COVID situation, country by country, looks different. Certainly, and now with the Delta variant, this certainly is another complexity to the return to normal. But I'd say, I see it anyway, that with each wave of this, we're getting better and better at responding to it and kind of shaking it off as much as possible. I hope we no longer have more to shake off, but it's good to see how much progress the teams have made.
No, I understand. And a question I do have is, in terms of yourself, I know you're fully focused on leadership. It's something that's extremely important to you. How has your leadership had to adapt through the COVID period?
Well, let's say I think my leadership is always adapting, and that's important. I mentioned where I was maybe 11 years ago as a leader, and then I think about where I am now. And truly this continuous improvement and growth on a personal level fuels me. And with that, then, each day I hope to have my leadership be better than the day before, right? So that's a key point, but I'm not trying to avoid your question about how leadership needed to change during COVID, because it really did. But I don't think we'll just say, that was a COVID leadership style, now we're done with that. I think it's here to stay, because if you think about leadership, at least the way I do, I define good leadership as courageously unleashing the fullest potential of the team to deliver on its purpose, its mission, and its commitments. Well, there's nothing unique about what we went through in COVID around delivering on its purpose, its mission, and commitments, and unleashing this fullest potential. So, with that kind of overall purpose statement of a good leader, then my focus during the virus was very much focused on making sure to ensure that everyone had the information that they needed and wanted, so that as a team we could really see the full context and picture of the situation, bringing out therefore the best ideas from all of the team, and then being able to be very open and transparent. Radical truth, even, I use with the team, as to borrow from Ray Dalio, really, but such a strong focus on communications during that time frame. So that's maybe in a nutshell one of the most important things I could say about COVID leadership, is just communications. And when you step back, you say, there's no way we don't need to keep communicating in this kind of VUCA world that we're in. And so that's my perspective.
Okay, and then obviously not getting over COVID because it's still here with the Delta variant, as you said, but then being fully electrified, and then we have kind of the chip crisis, the chip shortage. So how has that kind of affected business? Is that been had a huge impact on the organization?
Well, we're making, I say it's kind of like change or be changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're making big changes in our organization, really ever since 2019, with a strong focus on just how to win in the game of this transformation from the product side around this internal combustion engine moving to BEV. So we're changing ourselves. I wouldn't say we're being changed by COVID so much as really continuing on this path. And with every headline around, electrification, we continue to say this was the right strategic approach, really focusing all in with all of our chips into electrification. This focus with the Fit for 55 announcement in Europe, or the executive order last week from President Biden around 50% PHEV and BEV and fuel cell vehicles, you start to really see that this future is the right direction for us, and that's how we're shaping ourselves.
No, I understand. And in terms of the automotive industry in general, what do you see kind of the challenges being now, in your opinion?
We are a scale business, right? The automotive industry is a capital intensive, high volume business. And that means things built in hardware need to be at high volume. However, if you look at all the announced BEV vehicles coming, you'll say that I think there's 172 new electric vehicles to arrive in North America alone between 2020 and 2031. This is per IHS. And of those 172, 120 are between 2020 and 2025. So we have an explosion of choices for consumers, which is fantastic. It means they're finally going to be able to find, SUVs and crossovers that are also electric vehicles. And now you can finally say that there are vehicle types that consumers really want to buy in this type of powertrain. It's going to get very interesting, though, because I'm not sure the market has room for 172 new vehicle entries. So some of those are going to be winners and some of them are going to be losers. So from an industry perspective, or at least a supplier one, where we say, hey, we need to be able to have accurate forecasts of where our profits are going to be. We need to be able to understand, future vehicle volumes and things. This is extra challenging then, because it's important then that either a challenge is able to choose which are the right vehicles to get sourced on or to win business on, or to be very flexible with production assets. So this is a huge challenge. It's not a unique one for us. I think this is an industry challenge that is coming, and maybe even more challenging than in the past when powertrain volumes were easier to forecast.
Okay, and then obviously we've touched heavily on electric vehicles because of the business you're in. But what's your viewpoint on the technologies from electric to hydrogen to see the internal combustion engine? What's your view on the kind of trends?
Yeah, I mean, I have maybe a unique view on this because, as I mentioned, I had started my own advanced technology planning firm back in 2010. Actually, what that was very much focused on was looking at the regulatory environment and using data analytics and models to help predict which would be the most effective and efficient technology combinations that automakers and suppliers could bring to market to address those regulations in the lowest cost way, right? And so as we were looking at that, of course, we were looking at, future predictions and where the market would develop and things. And, I'm proud to say that back even 11 years ago, we were able to really accurately forecast Europe, China, and North America with regard to their powertrain propulsion adoption, even back then for now. Unfortunately, even back then, we could say we knew we weren't going to see much electrification in the North American market yet. Today, I think we're around about 3% in the market. And that's fundamentally what we were predicting back then. And the reason why was because, of course, the powertrain costs were higher for the electrified versions than their internal combustion variants, et cetera. So now we start to see these cost curves change. And of course, that's what leads to more of a tipping point in the marketplace. So I'm highly bullish on electrification in all markets now. It's no longer even I used to say it's not an if, it's a when around electrification. And now I don't even have to say it's a when, because with all these new requirements by 2030, it's this decade. And this is really playing out quite quickly.
Okay, and I think from the advancements in technologies, as you just mentioned, that North America is very heavily involved SUV truck, whereas Europe is more kind of pass car. So in terms of technologies, then even from 11 years ago, how, in your opinion, has that transformed the industry, and how will it continue to transform the industry?
So I think your question is, how is the technology transforming versus back then? Yeah, I mean, 10 years, 11 years ago, we were really very much in an incremental cost mode, right? Everything was, how do you reduce cost, not add cost? And now we're like, well, how do we reduce how much you add? So it's certainly gone in that way. But, I'll say this industry this market has always been a strongly performance-driven market. So trucks, SUVs, towing, all-wheel drive, 0 to 60 performance, number of forward gear speeds. These have always been the things that have sold vehicles in this market. So it's absolutely understandable that as the electrified propulsion offerings target performance characteristics, then you see this uptake in the market. So that's what's so different now. Is it used to be a performance story on number of cylinders and thinking about how big your engine was and things, and now we're looking at actually the performance that delivers, and people are able to, I think, take advantage of this great variety of opportunities to meet their various performance needs.
Okay. And then one thing, obviously, you touched on earlier within Vitesco was the diversity and inclusion aspect. And for you, recognized as one of the top 100 women within the automotive industry, which is a great achievement. Kind of, what's your viewpoint in the challenges that women would face within the industry to get into positions such as yours?
It's hard to answer that, Taylor, and I'm not being smart here, but I've only been a woman in this industry, so I don't know what it's like not to be a woman in this industry. And obviously, being a woman in a male-dominated industry has informed my leadership style. It's also, I think, given me a very strong sense of purpose around, I'm not going to give up this shot as head of North America to make a difference, to make an impact, enabling all of our talent to thrive to its fullest potential. And so, that kind of coming from a diverse angle has definitely informed my point of view, and maybe even strengthened my conviction about ensuring that we don't miss this opportunity to really drive change. As far as your second question around what could be done in order to get more women in, let's say, significant high impact roles in the automotive industry, actually, my idea is in a direction of we actually need to build more women to be P&L leaders, because P&L leaders actually are not only running businesses and therefore extremely influential, and then you have the whole role modeling for others, and starting to have critical mass of people in the leadership positions, but also, if you truly want to see more women in the industry in positions of impact, well, you got to say that the most impactful position in any company, I think, is CEO. And CEOs, you could tell us, they are typically sourced from P&L leaders. So ultimately, we need to see more women rise to and thrive in positions of P&L leadership. And that starts really early. It starts with getting manufacturing experience. It starts with, not being afraid to take these smart risks. It starts with a lot of things. And so this would be my wish in terms of how to see more women in positions of impact in the auto industry.
No, I think that's great. And I know previously when you've mentioned it, it's not about gender, it's who's best for the job. And that's what's the highest important aspect is. So from your side, as mentioned earlier, very, very focused around leadership, very focused around the people. You've been involved in various different situations, but when it comes to kind of crisis situations, volatile times within the business, what's your approach on kind of handling those situations and making sure everybody is not only bought in, but everybody's kind of calm through these situations?
That's a good setup of a question. How to keep people calm. Yeah, and I touched on it a little bit before, but it's extremely important to stay positive. And one of the things that I can do as a leader in staying positive is really making sure to check our framing of an issue, because there's lots of things that can happen to you that have happened to me. I'm sure have happened to you, and you can say, "Oh no, this is terrible, this is bad," and you can go down that rabbit hole. Or you can take it and you can say, "All right, I can't change that. How do I change the situation here? What is the lesson for us here? How can we learn and grow going through this?" So really taking a very deliberate approach to framing the situation in the best possible way so that you're growing through the crisis instead of maybe being a victim through the crisis. So that's one of the most important pieces I've found. When things get really tough, I get extra calm, and I don't know why. It just happens. So I just know that all eyes are on me in those moments, and I want to make sure that as I frame the situation, I'm doing it in the most positive, best way, because that's going to have a huge impact on everyone else. So, starting and ending with people, staying super positive with a can-do attitude and the proper framing around it. These are some of the most important first steps in a crisis. But, of course, you got to make decisions too. And those decisions being made kind of really with this focus on short and long term at the same time. These are my ingredients, as I said before, around really dealing with a crisis with the team.
Okay. And then obviously, as mentioned, you've been a very successful leader within the business, but not just focused on yourself, but what would you say the key elements are to being a successful leader that you have followed and that you look for in your teams?
Yeah. First ingredient is working as one team. As simple as that sounds, we work on it all the time, and I set up special meetings and types of meetings and other forms to make sure that we're working really together as one tight-knit team so that we represent all aspects of what we know and bring that together, which is very much related to the next piece, which is about diversity of thought. There's a lot, like we were talking about diversity, and that's good. Diversity is important, but it's so that you have diversity of thought as one of the major outcomes of that. And so it's really important as we are bringing greater levels of diversity into the organization that we keep focused on why, and that's for diversity of thought. And that means as a leader, I need to make sure to encourage disagreement, encourage psychological safety, to have an open and robust discussion, or else we lose the benefit of the diversity of thought. I also talked about communications, transparency and communications, this radical truth, letting people be able to put their issues on the table so we can address them. This is really important. And it kind of leads to maybe it's not very politically correct perhaps to say, but I talk about it as leading in the nude. When you're really working collaboratively with people, you're basically leading in the nude, because you're showing everything, and you're really saying, I trust you that you are not going to expect me to have all the answers, and I'm going to trust you likewise that you're going to work collaboratively, and we're going to come up with solutions together. So that's what I mean by that. And then maybe just one more that I think is so important and often undervalued. I learned it when I started my own company. As an entrepreneur, you learn it's so important not just to be working in the business, but to be working on the business. And this is something really in also big companies. Too often everyone's head down working in the business, and they forget to work on the business of improving themselves, improving the processes, improving the flows of information, checking in, improving the customer satisfaction. All these elements is really about how to improve, not just do the work of the business.
Okay, I understand. And obviously the high idea of this podcast, Futureproof, is really to understand how executives approach transformations. But from your side, looking at an organization, stepping in, an organization that's focused on the future, what would be the steps in you looking to future-proof an organization?
Well, if you say, what is maybe future-proof leadership?
Mm-hmm.
I think first of all, we all have to accept that future-proof or future-proofing comes from leadership, not command and control leadership, but from this kind of VUCA style leadership. And, VUCA is here to stay. So as we look at it, we say we really have to shed the old command and control leadership model, and instead really recognize that we're here as leaders to unleash the talent that we've got in service of, the overall results we're trying to achieve, and in service of our stakeholders. And that means we have to get really good at adaptation. So future-proof leadership is all about adaptation, and I would even put an equal sign next to it to say it's VUCA leadership. So this is really the key focus, and I think if we are driving positive outcomes, enabling people and our teams to do their best work, we're definitely going to be able to be adaptive and agile to the situation. And that this is the key to any organization, is having leadership focused on VUCA leadership.
Okay, no, I understand. And obviously we touched on the diversity aspect and females in the industry, but if we just look at it as a whole and say, what would your advice be for somebody looking to get into automotive? I know you had your interest from an engineering from your father, but what's your advice to someone wanting to get into automotive?
Well, if someone's wanting to get into automotive, and of course I assume wanting to be successful in automotive, then I'd really say never give up and keep learning constantly. I myself am amazed at how much I'm able to learn from everyone around me, but also through very intentional reading and listening and other things that I do to stay sharp and to keep learning new things. So if you continue to keep learning and reflecting on that learning, using it even, and never give up, I know that these are successful ingredients for the automotive industry.
Okay, and maybe a question that I can fire at you from a Vitesco standpoint. Obviously, if we're looking at technology, electrification, and then people were trying to get into the industry, what would you say you guys would do differently to attract talent rather than somebody that wants to go to the Bay Area to an Apple, a Tesla, or one of these kind of new technology firms?
Well, we are working on, powering clean mobility. So we're working on very exciting technology, and we're doing it, as I said, in the best of both worlds of a 150-year-old startup. And what could be cooler than that? So this is a pretty exciting place to be. And as we're growing and building, I already said before, it's a lot of fun to grow and build. And so we welcome people to join us in that. Furthermore, sometimes people can work from the Bay Area for us, right? Because you can work from anywhere. So I think we've got the right blend.
No, that's great. And then similarly, someone that's already in the industry could be maybe a managerial position, wanting to get into the leadership capability, wanting to grow to achieve something similar to yourself. What's your advice for that sort of person?
It's really no different than anyone wanting to be successful in the industry. And it's really about continuing to keep learning and never give up. These are going to allow that person then, of course, to progress in their leadership journey. Maybe one additional thing, as that applies from a leadership perspective, is to find some role models that you can really pay attention to and discover your own leadership approach, of course, but you've got to accelerate beyond your own experiences through getting the knowledge from others.
Okay, and for you then, who's been kind of your role models or your most inspiring leader that you've worked for or worked with during your career?
Yeah, well, as a female in the automotive industry, hands down, I would say, Mary Barra has been, certainly a bright light, and someone that I've watched and certainly been inspired by. Beyond that, one of the things that really stuck with me, someone I work for currently, our CEO, Andreas Wolf, he said when he took this role to head up Vitesco Technologies, he said, I did not join this company, Vitesco Technologies, in order to just maintain a business. I came here to transform it. And this was really inspiring to me as well, because I view myself as a change agent, and those words were change agent talk for sure. Seeing someone such as him really stand up there and say, I'm here to transform a business. I saw how motivational that was, not only for myself, but also for others. So that had a big impact on me as well. Beyond that, I feel like I take a little bit of what to do and what not to do from everyone I come into contact with. So I'm just constantly bringing those bits together. And this, of course, informs me and supports my journey.
Okay, and one question I always ask to kind of finish the podcast is asking you the question. I know your career is a long way from over, but what do you want to be remembered for? What does your legacy look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I tie that very much to what's my purpose too, and I've gotten pretty clear about my purpose as a leader, and I would define it as building self-propelling, so they don't need me anymore, but building self-propelling world-class winning teams. That's what I want to do. I want to generate a bigger ambition in others. And, bringing those two things together, I think would be an awesome legacy that I would hope inspires others to do the same.
No, Sandy, that's great. And I can say from my side, I've really enjoyed the conversation today. I know the listeners from their side, it'll be extremely insightful, but it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today, and thank you for taking part.
Thank you, Taylor.